go. Hello, everyone. We'll give it just a second to let people log on before we get started. I hope everyone's having a great mid-November afternoon or morning or whatever time zone you may be in. I know we're on the East Coast over here, at least a couple of us, so we're just hitting our afternoon, that afternoon stretch, if you will. I know it's a busy time of year for everyone, so I thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. I know we're 2 weeks out from Giving Tuesday, so I'm sure your to-do lists are probably much longer than mine. So thank you again so much for joining us today. To make sure you get all your time this afternoon, we're going to kick things off right away. Welcome. My name is Danny Clough. I'm the channel marketing coordinator over here on the QGIve team. I'm joined today by Brendan Smith from QGIV's business development team, as well as our speaker, Noah Barnett from Feather, who's going to be sharing 8 nonprofit digital marketing strategies that you can utilize for year-end giving this season. You can get the most out of this time of year. As we get started, I want to remind everyone that today's webinar is eligible for 1 credit of continuing education towards your CFRE credential. So if that applies to you, make sure you're taking advantage of that. A few house notes before we begin today. We are recording this webinar, so everyone who's registered today is going to receive a recording of the webinar tomorrow, as well as a link to the slide and a few additional free resources. Throughout the webinar, feel free to chat with Brendan, Noah, or I in that chat area of Zoom. And if you have any questions, you can add those into the Q&A box. If you have trouble with that, though, you can add those into the chat area as well, and we'll make sure to take note of those so that Noah can answer those towards the end of the webinar. And before we get started, for those of you who may be unfamiliar with QGIve, we are an online fundraising platform for nonprofits of all sizes. We have solutions for year-round fundraising tools, text giving, peer-to-peer, and auction tools. If any of those sound like something that could benefit you and your organization, please reach out to us. We'd love to chat more with you about how we can help you reach your fundraising goals. We're also so excited to share our wonderful partner network with all of you. One of those partners, of course, being Feather. Feather's nonprofit marketing platform helps you run and report on integrated marketing campaigns with easy-to-use advertising, email, and digital engagement tools. And of course, joining us today is Noah. Noah comes to us with over a decade of experience working in nonprofit fundraising and marketing leadership roles. I have talked far too much today for all of you, so I'm going to hand things over to Noah so he can share what we're all really here to hear.
Thanks, Danny. I appreciate the time, and thanks everyone for joining me for this session. As Danny mentioned, it's a busy time of year, and you're giving of your time here. And I think part of that is one of the tips that I'll be sharing is that you have to prep and you have to invest time in really thinking well about your end of year fundraising. But before I get into the content for today's session, what I would love to do is learn from you. So first and foremost, make sure you know where the chat is and change it to everyone. And I would love to know what your number 1 priority goal for end of year in 2023 is. Your number 1 goal. It could be donor acquisition. It could be a fundraising goal. Like, hey, we just got to raise 100 grand. That's our goal. Or maybe you want to acquire new donors. Maybe you want to re-engage old donors. Like, what's that number 1 priority? Because I want to center ourselves on that as we get started today. So drop it in the chat, just the webinar chat. Acquire new donors. Hey, Sandra. Marcy says increasing year-end fundraising goal. Nora says we're trying to raise 200K. Kim, 50K. Those are big numbers. Re-engaging old donors, looking to re-engage old donors, etc. Unrestricted funds, donor acquisition, meet state required standards for collecting, spending, and still have balance in our general account. Absolutely. Raising $12, Brooke. Hopefully it's a little bit more than that, but 12 is still good. No judgment here. 12K. Acquire new donors and better tracking. Excellent. But why I wanted to center us around that is because that's what we're here focusing on. Yes, it's end of year fundraising. Yes, we want to stand out from which of these is best fit for my goal. Because one thing I can guarantee is no matter what I say here today, all 8 of them is likely not going to be ideal for your specific goal. And so hopefully you get 2 to 4 of these ideas that are going to help you be more successful. And just for further context, as Danny mentioned, I work at a company called Feather, which is a nonprofit marketing platform. And can you all still see my screen okay, Danny? It just jumped and disconnected for me on my end. Cool. We'll just keep going and assume so.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. We not only have the opportunity or for nonprofits to run and report on campaigns on our platform, it also gives me the privilege of being able to observe over 1,500 nonprofits and associations as they run their end of year fundraising campaigns. So these optimization and tips aren't just coming from nowhere or just my ideas or my experience. They're actually coming from observing what's really working. So let's go ahead and get into these 8 nonprofit marketing strategies for year-end fundraising. Now, number 1 is, whoops. Sorry about that, y'all. My slides are acting up. Before we get into the 8 nonprofit marketing strategies and recommendations I have, this is a tense time of year. And sometimes we can be so frustrated and focused on like, well, we need to hit this goal, we need to hit this goal, that we can feel as though we are against everyone else. We're against, the noise, we're against the competition, we're against the other charities trying to raise money. We might even be against other people on our team because we're just frustrated and we're focused on this goal. And the thing I want to make sure we remind ourselves is what our actual jobs are as nonprofit leaders and fundraisers. And that is to do this, which is a quote from the founder of Save the Children, is that we, fundraisers, you, have to devise a means of making known the facts in such a way as to touch the imagination of the world. The world is not ungenerous, but unimaginative and very busy. Now, the reason I bring this up in contrast to maybe how you feel is that if we set ourselves in our focus that our jobs is to devise a means of making known the facts in such a way as to touch the imagination of the world. The world is not ungenerous, but unimaginative and very busy. It changes our posture from us having an against posture during end of year season to an activating posture, meaning we have the opportunity, it's an opportunity, it's not a challenge, to unlock generosity for our cause, for our area, for our mission. Now, some of you said, hey, I need to raise critical funding. I need to reach new donors. I need to reactivate old donors. Those are pathways to achieving something. And it's our jobs to unlock that potential or to activate that potential. But we are not fighting against something. We are not against. And I think this posture here, and I've been in the chair, I've spent 7 years fundraising for an international relief nonprofit, just gets us in the wrong mindset. And so as we're going throughout today's presentation, I want us to just take a deep breath and remind ourselves that the world is not ungenerous, but unimaginative and very busy. And our job as fundraisers, as nonprofit leaders, is to activate that potential towards the cause that we have in mind. Now, with that, let's get into the 8 recommendations. So number 1 is that preparation matters. And you've already started doing this well because you're sitting on this webinar. Preparation matters. And when I talk about preparation, it matters because if we leave preparation out, we typically opt for what I call typical marketing. And so at end of year, we're either going to do nothing, we're going to just try to do everything. So like TikTok to telethons to billboards to broadcast media, we're just going to throw everything at the wall and hope for the best. Now, the last strategy we do is we're just going to do a bunch of random things like, hey, we're going to try this. Or last year we tried this, so let's try this year. This is kind of like the hopscotch strategy or the board member strategy, where it's just like, hey, we're going to try this and see what happens. We're going to try this and see what happens. So you either do nothing if you don't prepare well, you do everything and just try to throw it all at the wall, or you just do a bunch of random things. And I think the thing is that what I like to call this is not really marketing. It's actually unreliable magic. And the thing about preparation and being successful at end of year is that you want to not do typical marketing. You want to have a plan to do what we call here at Feather good marketing. And good marketing is centered on your community, your audience. What do they care about? Why are they engaged with you? What do we understand about them that might be able to bridge the gap and connect them with our campaign this year? Yes, we want to raise $5,000 or $12,000 or $200,000. Yes, we want to activate new donors. Okay, well, who's in our community? What do we understand about them? How might we connect their context to the campaign we're trying to run? It's not about convincing people to do what we want. It's about first understanding the community. And again, this is where preparation matters a lot. And I'm going to provide a framework on how you can prepare well. The second quality of good marketing is that it's responsive. It's not linear. It's not like I'm just going to try all these things and like I'll get my score at the end. It's actually responsive. It's a conversation. You might send out an email campaign and it might completely flop and be like, okay, well, what did we learn about that? And how do we infuse those learnings back into our future end of year assets or strategies? Maybe it wasn't just the email, or maybe the email didn't go off well, or hey, that subject line actually didn't resonate. And so now we can have a conversation. Or you might send out an email and only half as many people responded that you had hoped for. That's just your first score. Being responsive enables you to say, I got this first score, which was 50% of the people that I expected to respond responded. Now I get to respond to that. What was unique about the people that responded? Was there something common, or was there some commonality? Was it their previous engagement? What was it about it? What about the people that didn't respond? Was there any commonalities or whatnot? This is what we mean by responsive, is that it's a conversation as you run your campaigns versus it being this linear, like I'm going to throw a dart and hope for the best. The third quality of good marketing is that it's omni-channel. And so instead of us siloing our efforts into channels and saying, how are we going to use Facebook to hit our year-end goal? How are we going to use email to hit our year-end goal? What about direct mail? We first and foremost are focusing on the community and saying, which channels should we use to connect with this portion of our community? It's not about what you do individually on a channel like email or Facebook or direct mail. It's about what's the orchestration of the concert of efforts that we're doing to engage with them. And again, that takes preparation. And that's an element of good marketing. And last but not least, it's measurable. And so when you prep early, you can establish not only what you want to measure, but how you're going to measure it. So again, the key to focusing and getting your end of year campaigns, and again, you've already started this because you're here today on this webinar, is to prep. And so what I would like to do is give you a framework that you can use to prep various parts of your end of year fundraising campaign. And I'm going to give you a primer on this. We could spend 45 minutes talking about this framework. We don't have 45 minutes to do that because we have 7 other tips that I would love to give you. But we're going to provide this framework and I'm going to give you an overview for it. And again, this framework can be applied to various aspects of your campaigns and something you can use even beyond end of year. Now, why am I showing you a picture of my son? I'm talking about frameworks and I'm showing you a picture of my son. It could be because if you show pictures of your kids, you tend to get better reviews as a presenter. That could be one, but actually I have a point here that aligns with the framework. Now, I just talked about frameworks, and we're going to use a framework to prepare well for end of year campaign. And you might say, like, what is a framework? How is that helpful? And the thing I love about this picture is it encapsulates the 2 core values of using a framework to prep. Instead of just preparing well and sitting on this webinar and coming up with a bunch of tips and going back, I'm going to give you a framework that's going to help you prepare well. And the 2 core elements of a framework is first and foremost focus. And as you can see, my son Eli here is like very intentional. He's very focused on what he's doing and he's creating a plan. The second aspect of a framework is it provides you flexibility. The second part of a framework is it provides you flexibility. And so yes, he has focus, but a framework also gives flexibility. He's writing in pencil, so he knows that he might mess up or he might learn something and might want to erase it here. And that's exactly what a framework is designed to do. So let's get into the framework. We call this the good marketing framework. And again, it's something you can use as you prep for your end of year campaigns. So the first part of the good marketing framework is you're going to identify who you are trying to engage in your end of year campaign. And this isn't everyone you want to engage, but just picking one segment. So for example, someone here, Melissa, said, I want to acquire new donors. And so it could be, hey, I want to acquire new donors. That's what I'm trying to target. Another individual in the chat, let me pull it back up, was Emily. She said she wanted to re-engage old donors. And so again, you're already starting to work through this, is that you've identified who you are trying to engage or connect with first and foremost. So that's step one of the framework, is identify who you want to connect with. The second part of the framework is you want to understand what you know about this segment of your community. You want to understand what you know about this segment of your community. And there are two core questions you can ask. The first question is, what has this part of our community done previously with us? And so if you're familiar with segmentation strategies, this is where all of that comes into play. So what have they given to before? How much have they engaged previously? When was the last time they gave? What, just the basic facts of how have they given before? What is their level of investment? What programs or projects have they given to before? Have they attended events or even volunteered or attended maybe your facility if you have an in-person facility? There are a lot of different answers to this question. Now, if you're like Melissa, she said, I want to acquire new donors. So you might say, well, I don't know any, like they've done nothing with us. They're new and we don't even know who they are. They're prospective donors. We're trying to reach them. We're trying to engage with them. That's important too. So that's the first question, is what do you know about them and their previous engagement with you? The second question you want to ask is a little bit tricky. And it's, how would they, this part of your community, describe their relationship with you? How would they describe their relationship with you? Now, if you have a bunch of survey data that had that question on it, then you know the answer. However, most people aren't going to have direct inputs from their supporters on the answer to this question. And prospective donors, you're like, I haven't even met them yet. How would I know how they would describe their relationship with me? And so we have to use some creative liberties on answering this question. But the important part of it is you want to answer it from the perspective of the supporter, is how they would describe their relationship with you. So for example, in Melissa's case, a prospective donor that's never engaged with your organization would say, I don't even know who these people are. I don't know who ABC nonprofit is. I've never engaged with them. However, what you can begin to start describing, because again, these are prospective donors. You don't want anyone giving to your cause. You want people you want to reach people that have a high affinity or alignment to your cause area to give to your cause or to give to your organization. And so you might say, hey, they know nothing about our organization, but they live in Colorado. They like outdoors and they care about the protection of our state parks in Colorado. So you're starting to craft like a prospective donor persona based on their relationship with the cause that you're working with. They have no relationship with your organization, but they have a relationship to the cause. Now that's going to be important because when we're crafting our campaigns to engage these prospective donors, all of this feedback is going to come back into play. Now, with Emily's case, where she actually is just trying to engage current donors, she might be able to describe the relationship that someone might say, yeah, we deeply support. I've been a loyal supporter for 3 years of this nonprofit. And so that context of that relationship with you in the segment is going to be helpful because you're going to start with the context the segment has with your organization to inform how you're going to connect with them. Okay, the context of the segment or the part of your community you're trying to engage has to inform how you design the campaigns, the content you use, and the channels you use. Okay, that's step 2 in the framework. Step 3 is you're going to design a campaign that helps you cultivate a connection with this audience. And within a campaign, there's 2 elements. There's the content, which is like, what is the messaging, the story, the creative, the content that we're going to use to connect with this audience. Now, with a new audience, you have to inform them that you work on a cause they care about because they don't have any context to your organization. So you have to give some more details about your organization. And so the type of content you use for a new donor would be different than the type of content you would use for a loyal donor. The second part of a campaign is the channels that you're going to use to actually cultivate connection. And so in the prospective donor side, you don't have their email address, you don't have their address. And so you might need to use channels like digital advertising or geolocation targeting or search advertising, because that's going to help you enable reach towards a new audience. You could also even use things like lookalike audiences, where you can take your current best donors, use that to inform a advertising strategy on social or digital to reach your next best donors. Again, that channel is digital advertising, but you're using that channel because it's the right channel or the right set of channels based on what you understand about the community. Now, in the other example where you already know these loyal donors, you have access to much more channels. You could use direct mail, you could use the phone, you could use email, you could use social advertising and retargeting on that. You could use advertising. There's so many more opportunities. But again, the channels you use to connect with an audience is dictated by what you know and what they know about you. And so that comes into play here. When you're designing a campaign, you need to align the content to the community and the channels you're using to the community. And that's going to help you design, how are we going to cultivate connection with this? And it could be as simple as we're going to send emails to them, and we're going to do digital advertising to them as well, so that they're getting surround as they wander the web, scroll social, and they're in their inbox. That might be the channel mix you use, and the content would be different as well. So step 3 is decide on how you're going to cultivate connection, and that requires you to decide on content and the channels you're going to use. Now, the last part of this is that you want to figure out what you're actually going to activate them to do. What is the ask? It might be as simple as to come watch a video. It might be to actually make a donation. It might be to sign up for an email list. What is the right action or activation step that you want to ask this group of people to do? Now, with loyal donors, it might be, can we count on your support again? Commit to give again. For prospective donors, it might actually be just getting them to sign up or sign a petition for the cause area, because you're going to ask them to give or to contribute later. But the first right step is getting them to take some sort of advocacy action. Now, if you're using a fundraising platform like QGive, you might even be inviting people to be peer-to-peer donors or to be ambassadors, because they've already given to your year-end campaign. That's the segment you're targeting. And you're inviting them to now be an advocate for the campaign. This is where you decide what you are activating them to do. And last but not least is this framework is circular, not linear. It's a learning framework, not a linear framework. And so you always want to make sure that you're pulling the insights you learn from the campaign into future campaigns. And again, this framework can work for you as you're designing the various campaigns you're going to run at end of year. But it first and foremost starts with your community. And this is how you can prepare well using a framework like the Good Marketing Framework. So one thing here, which is a quote from Chandler McFarlane, who's one of our digital campaign strategists here at Feather, is he said, we have to think of the end of year campaigns as the performance. All the hours of practice and meeting with the band and practicing your own scales and practicing the song, that's the year-round thing. It's not the one time you practice the song. And I think the reason I include this quote is because the framework we just shared, and the reason preparation is your biggest proponent of success at end of year, is because it's that prep that's going to help you have that amazing end of year experience. And he's kind of illustrating that through analogy in this. So that's step 1. We spent a lot of time on it, but again, preparation matters. If you're looking to drive more success, slowing down and walk through the framework of who we're going to target, how should we engage with them, what do we know about them, what are we actually asking them to do, is going to be extremely helpful as you design your year-end campaigns. Now, number 2 optimization tip is hyper segmentation. And what I mean by hyper segmentation is that you might want to reach your $200,000 goal, as someone shared at the beginning of this. But what you need to do now is break it down to say, well, how much of that is coming from donors that gave last year? How much of that is going to be coming from donors that didn't give last year, but they've given before? And how much is that coming from new donors or prospective donors? Or what other segments do I have? Like, where do I think that these funds are going to be raised from? The mistake I often see is that you have a $200,000 goal or a $12,000 goal, and you say, I'm going to do all of these activities. I'm going to email things, I'm going to mail things, and I'm going to do this. And I'm going to hope that all of this adds up to my goal. And when it doesn't, you're like, shoot, why? What happened? And that's because we didn't have expectations or a hypothesis of where that funding was going to come from, and then designing our campaigns against that. And that's where hypersegmentation comes into play. And again, that was the first step of the framework. And it's the second step of optimizations that I'm going to offer you today, because it's really important. Who you are targeting should determine what you do, not your activities informing who you send that to. Again, it's marketing. So the market comes first. It's not ing market. And so determining who your segments are and what the expectations and goals are for each of those segments is critical to your end of year success, because then you can ensure that you both apply the right effort and the right campaign to that segment to have an increased likelihood that you're going to hit your goal. So again, bringing the $200,000 back to the table, you might say, hey, 120,000 of this is going to come from donors that gave to us at end of year last year. And we have a high level of confidence that that is going to happen, because that's a 70% retention rate of the revenue we got last year. And we believe that we can increase average giving by 10% from that segment, and we can get around 120,000. Okay, great. That's awesome. That's a significant portion. So we're going to invest a lot of effort in that segment. The other 40,000 is going to come from donors that have given to you before, but they haven't engaged in your year-end campaign. That's reasonable. And then the other 40,000 is going to come from new donors. And so we have to have a new donor strategy if we expect $40,000 to come from new donors. And again, that helps us then segment our efforts, and we can begin to orient our campaigns to actually achieve those outcomes. But hypersegmentation is where this starts. Now, a few recommendations that go well beyond what I just shared is that you can segment pretty deep. And what we see is that the organizations that invest more in segmentation actually increase their results because they're focusing on relevance, not reach for their campaigns. They're depending on increasing relevance to have higher conversion rates, not increased reach with a retained conversion rate. If you always focus on reach, you'll always be hungry for more and more and more. Whereas if you focus on relevancy, you can actually get more out of the current audience you have. And so if you are trying to push that, big rock up a hill and get 50,000, last year only got 30,000, the default would be like, oh, we just need to reach more people. But it might be that you just need to hyper segment and then increase the relevance of your campaigns per segment, because that will increase the likelihood of participation. It's about relevancy, not reach. So a few other vectors of segmentation that you can use is first and foremost around engagement. And so how engaged is a segment with your organization? Have they engaged with you in the last 90 days? This could be they've been to your website. It could be that they attended an event. It could be that they've given to you, whatever engagement looks like for your organization. And then you have an unengaged. So they may have been previously donated, but they've been disengaged for the last 90 days or 6 months. How you communicate to an engaged audience and how you communicate to a disengaged audience might be different. In the same way with behaviors, where if someone has volunteered or they've attended an event, but they've never donated, that context that they have or the behaviors that they've shown previously with your organization could be a segmentation variable that helps you increase the relevancy of your campaigns. So when you're talking to someone about that volunteered with your organization and inviting them to be a part of your year-end campaign, you can lean into, wow, you've been on the ground in the warehouses helping us do the front lines work. But we have to distribute all of that good work, and we want to invite you to be a part of it. We've had 900 volunteers this year say yes, and we'd love to include you in that. Hyper relevant to the volunteer audience. Can't send that to a larger audience. Same with event attendees. An event is typically hosted by someone. There's like an MC, maybe someone like me or someone like Danny, who's basically hosting the event. If I know that there's a group of my supporters that attended this event recently, I might be able to use the MC as the voice of the campaign towards that segment, because they're the most trusted and loyal connection point with the organization. So instead of it sending an email from my executive director, it might be sending it from Danny, who is the MC of that event. And they might reference the moments we shared together where the balloons dropped and we were able to celebrate the number of lives that we saved together. You can't do that if you don't hypersegment. Interest is another great way to do this. So maybe you have different types of programs in your organization, and there's different ways that you can measure interest. One is by that they've actually given to a specific program. They've designated funds to the adoption program, not the advocacy program, as an example, or the dogs versus the cats. You can also look at email behavior or website behavior and say which of our audience has engaged more with our advocacy content versus our adoption content. Again, you're just trying to increase your understanding of the community so that you can use that understanding to increase relevancy of your messaging and your content to better connect with that audience. Intent could be that when someone visits your website and they leave, they've shown some sort of intent to engage at end of year. And so you might have a specific campaign and messaging around people that visit our site in November and December. We want to re-engage them to come back, and we're going to use email and digital advertising to do that. That could be something that's interesting. Also the relationship. So it could just be that their relationship with your organization is defined by some variable that's important. And so maybe they're a member, or they're a monthly giver, or they've been a loyal patron for 5 years. A lot of organizations have these relationship designations. It could be that they've just given to your organization through a peer-to-peer campaign. Again, all of that deeply matters when you're designing your segmentation strategies. And the point I'm trying to make here is that based on what segmentation strategy you use, that would then inform the types of campaigns you have to, again, increase relevancy over reach. Okay, number 3, email marketing is still the number one digital channel. We did a state of nonprofit marketing report back in January, and trend number 3 was that we rely heavily on email, and for good reason. Let me paint that picture. So 54% of our respondents designate email as the most important channel that they use to connect with their audience. And another 32%, so 86%, said it was 1, 2, or 3 in that. Now, comparing that to an M&R benchmark report found that for every 1,000 fundraising emails an organization sent, they raised about $78 in support. And so what this paints this picture is that we both project that email is really important to us, and it's proven out in the fundraising data that the more you invest in email, the more money you will raise during the end of year season. So email marketing, which is a core part of this, is super important. And we see this as well for our customers here at Feather that use our email marketing tools, that email is still a very, very important channel. Now, the reason I share that is because there are so many bright and shiny objects, as Taylor talks about. Some are great, some are a flash in the pan. Nonprofits need to keep doing the basics really well and keep doing the channels they know are working well. And the reason I include this quote from my friend Taylor Shanklin is that we can often say, oh, well, we've been doing email for a long time. We'll just rerun the email program, and then we're going to try TikTok, or we're going to try this YouTube live situation. And we spend a lot of our effort and energy on the new, bright, and shiny versus making sure that we are optimizing and focusing on our email or our core strategies, and email being one of that. And so what I would invite you to do with this optimization tip is to go back and make sure you review your success the past year or the past 2 years in your email marketing programs, and look for ways to optimize your email outcome. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. I actually hosted a training last week on optimizing email. And so if you're interested in that, you can let me know in the chat at the end. But either way, focusing in on optimizing your email is really, really important. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Some of those key success metrics might be increasing the engagement rate of your emails. And so if you have a 30 or 40% engagement rate, how do you increase that? Because that might increase your outcomes. You can increase your click-through rates. You can focus on the conversions you're driving from email. So of the people you email, how many people are actually taking the action that you hoped for? How many people are actually taking the action that you hoped for? Or even more importantly, you could focus in on revenue. And so it's not about the individual emails conversion rate, but rather of the people that we've been emailing for the last 45 days, what is the overall revenue that we've raised from that audience? Now, the key reminder here is when you're optimizing your email marketing, you have to remember that what you choose to measure will directly impact how you optimize. So if I'm optimizing for engagement, I might focus on one thing. If I'm optimizing for revenue overall from a segment, I might try a different thing where I'm sending multiple emails, but every email doesn't have to have a direct ask in it. One might be a story, one might be a thank you. Maybe there's a direct ask, maybe there's another direct ask, and it's complemented by direct mail or digital advertising. Because I'm focusing on the revenue from the segment, not per email, I would optimize for different things. So again, number 3 is to focus on email, revisit your email marketing strategy and make sure that you are looking at ways to optimize your results. As you're doing that, being clear on what you're measuring success on. Is it revenue per email, email revenue, overall revenue? And then that then will determine what optimizations you actually make. Okay. So number 4 as an optimization tip is digital advertising. Another trend that we observed in the State of Nonprofit Marketing report was that most nonprofits we surveyed were doubling down on digital, especially advertising. Here's a little bit of peek into the data, but basically what this says is that people are investing more and more in digital channels and specifically into digital advertising. And less than, I think, 7% said they were even going to decrease, and the majority said they were actually going to increase their budget. The thing here is that if you're focusing in on your end of year campaign and you are currently doing 0 digital advertising, I would encourage you to look for ways that you could find budget to experiment with digital advertising, because it's going to help complement your other efforts and increase your outputs. Or if you're already spending money on digital advertising, considering how you could either spend more or optimize that digital advertising to align with your other channels. And so if you're just running kind of evergreen ads where you're just saying, hey, here's our organization, donate to us, it might be better for you to consider only showing ads to people you're emailing, for example, because you can match your email list to your advertising lists and you can make sure that those messages are complementing each other. And we usually see about 150 to 200% increase in output when the channels are complementing each other versus competing against each other. So if you're experimenting with digital advertising, here are a few ways that you can use digital advertising for various goals that you might have. So the first one I want to focus on is if you are looking to acquire new donors at end of year, there's a type of advertising called affinity targeting. And what affinity targeting allows you to do is use what you know about your current best donors to reach donors that look like that and can become your future best donors. So what you know about your current best donors can help you reach your next best donors. And so you can put in things like income, demographics, location. You can even actually upload an email list, as I mentioned, and use what's called lookalike audiences, which I believe is the next one. No, it's not. But you can basically use what you know about your current best donors to find your future best donors or your next best donors. That's one way you can do digital advertising, and it's called affinity targeting. The next, which I've mentioned a few times on today's presentation already, is that instead of just focusing on your email marketing strategy, you can actually map your email list to a digital advertising platform like Feather, or if you're using a different one, that works too. But you can then make sure that you're using digital advertising to reach the people in your database or the people that are on your email list. The great thing about this is that most emails only have somewhere between a 20 and a 50% open or engagement rate, whereas digital advertising can help you increase that engagement rate because you're complementing your email marketing program with your digital advertising program. Again, this is a way to optimize your results even further and using digital advertising. The last, which is extremely valuable and something that many nonprofits are not using. So if you're not doing this today, I highly recommend you consider doing this year end, which is targeting people who started to fill out a form on your website, but did not finish. So they came to your donation page that you've built and designed, and it's beautiful. They went to give, and then they didn't complete it. And instead of just letting that go and trying to email them again or do something else, you can actually use digital advertising to invite them to finish their donation as a reminder. Again, they've already showed intent and engagement. And so by spending a little bit of additional resourcing to do retargeting or donation abandonment advertising, you can increase your conversion rates from the same group of people instead of always trying to fight to reach new people. So again, these are just 3 of the most popular ways that Feather customers are using digital advertising to increase their results. Okay, number 5 is retargeting, expand impact of other channels. I've already touched on this a little bit, but one thing I wanted to highlight here is that if you just do typical marketing, which is, hey, I'm going to send some direct mail, I'm going to do some emails, I might even do some phone calls or social media, that's what we call typical marketing. And typical marketing has about a 50% connection rate, meaning of all the people that you know and you want to connect with, and you're already trying to engage, you're likely only connecting with about 50% of them. Now, if we can use something like retargeting, we can actually increase that connection rate to somewhere around 130%. And the reason we can do this is because you're not only focusing on increasing your engagement of people you already engage, like your email list, your donor database, or people on social, but you're also reaching people you should engage, like people that come to your website and leave. But in addition to that, using digital advertising, you can target people you want to engage. And that's where using your current best donors to help you reach your next best donors comes into play. And this is where retargeting and digital advertising becomes extremely, extremely effective. So a few examples here of some of our customers at Feather that we've observed using this effectively is the International Justice Mission. So they ran an end-of-year campaign to help end modern-day slavery. And so as people visit their website throughout the year end, and then they went to the Food Network to get recipes for a holiday meal, they were reminded about the impact that they could have through IJM. Now, the goal here isn't just to get direct clicks, right? Like I'm looking at a recipe, but by staying top of mind and staying engaged with your audience, it increases the likelihood they'll respond to a future connection point. There's a law of 7 in digital advertising, and it gets very heady very quickly. But the idea is that if you can stay top of mind and engage with your audience more often, it increases the likelihood that they'll respond at a moment of ask. So if I send them an email and I've been doing digital advertising to keep IJM top of mind, it'll increase the likelihood that we drive that conversion. Here's another one where there was a program that Degrees of Change was running, and they were using digital retargeting ads to drive up engagement and conversions in that program. Another one here with Association of Texas Professional Educators, where they were actually trying to drive member signups. And so they were encouraging people that went to explore membership. They were using digital retargeting to invite them back. Again, retargeting is about the idea of providing the people that have engaged with you historically at end of year to have increased opportunities to re-engage with you. And you're not just limited to email or direct mail or social media, you're using digital advertising to be able to do that. Now, again, that was number 5. Number 6 as a tip is to use CRM retargeting to reactivate donor list with advertising. I already mentioned this once in the digital advertising side, but basically you can use things like recent or previous donors, former volunteers, previous event attendees, or even lists of unsubscribers. So maybe they've opted out of your emails. You could still use that email list to be able to engage them as they're scrolling social or wandering the web. Number 7, we're almost to the end. Number 7 is geofencing and search intent advertising. Now, these are great optimizations if you're looking to acquire new donors. And so if you're looking to acquire new donors at end of year, one of these 2 tactics might be helpful to you as you pursue that at end of year. So the first one is called geofencing. This is perfect fit for organizations that have more of a localized footprint or a targeted footprint on where their best donors come from, because it allows you to target people based on location. If you've been around fundraising a while, like I have, there was a concept in direct mail where you would buy zip codes. And so you'd say, hey, I want to buy access, or I want to rent access to the mailing addresses of people in these zip codes, because I believe that they would have an increased affinity to support our cause, given that we're, a local animal shelter or a community food bank, or because individuals that live in these populated areas align with some sort of situational affinity for our cause. That's where geofencing comes into play. There are two types of geofencing. One is saying, I want to target people that are in this area for a period of time. And so it could be a zip code, it could be a radius around key areas that you're doing prospecting in or where your best donors currently live, and you want to reach their neighbors and their friends. The other way you can use geofencing is you can target locations and say, I want to reach these people after they leave this location, but they were in this location during, this time period. Where we see this most effective is when you have a donor or a prospective donor base that might concentrate themselves. And so, for example, we have an organization that is trying to reach people in the medical community, and specifically medical community around specific rare diseases. And those rare diseases and medical community get together at conferences and then obviously go back to their respective communities to serve patients that are impacted by these diseases, this rare disease. They're able to target that conference and say, hey, if anyone was in this area for this weekend or this time period, we would like to target them during end of year with these advertisements, inviting them to contribute and support our cause. That's where geofencing becomes a really helpful tactic to reach new donors. Oh, I already did this. Yeah, some geofencing ideas around country clubs, yacht clubs, golf courses, targeted neighborhoods or postal codes, churches and places of worship, if that's a segment that has a lot of prospective donors that align with your cause, festivals, concerts, sporting events, and then even conferences. Now, the next way you can use advertising to reach new donors is what's called search intent advertising. Now, I'm sure many of you are taking advantage of the Google Ad Grant, which is basically this grant from Google that enables you to put those blue link ads in search results. So maybe someone's looking for nonprofit supporting environmental conservation. And you say, hey, Preserve or nature.org has an ad here to get donations. That is one way to use search advertising to reach new donors that align with your cause. The other is what is called search intent advertising, which basically means that when someone searches for, let's say, topic A, Colorado State Park hiking guide, I can now say, I would like to reach anyone who's searched for that type of search, like hiking in Colorado, family outing in Colorado, children's activities during winter in Colorado. So anything that expresses some sort of affinity to outdoors in Colorado, I can now target, I can now target those individuals, not when they're searching for that, but based on them searching for that with digital advertising. So again, you're not trying to show up in the search results, but because they searched for specific topics, that would indicate that they have a likelihood or an affinity towards giving towards your cause. So it could be something around your cause area, it could be location-based, or it could be search queries and terms that indicate that they fit your ideal donor personas. So one could be that if I'm searching for summer camps for kids in Phoenix, that indicates that I have kids that I'm looking for activities to do. And it might indicate I also have some sort of disposable income because I'm actually searching for camps that I can send my kids to. Now, if your cause served families that didn't have means to send their kids to camp, or was just providing support services for families in the Phoenix Valley, you might want to target me, not while I'm searching, but the fact that I did search a family and I'm looking for summer camps, you could target me with digital advertising based on that query. So these are both. Geofencing is like a location-based search intent, and the other one is the actual search query. So based on what I'm searching for, you now want to target me because there's an alignment to the affinity there. Okay, last but not least, number 8, and I've mentioned this a few times, but I just want to drill this home, is that you must use omni-channel marketing to expand the reach and ROI of your end of year fundraising campaigns. What this really means is that you don't want to think about your end of year campaigns just as email or just as digital advertising or just as direct mail, but how do we make sure that we say, hey, we're targeting donors that have given to us previously. We are going to use email. We're going to use digital ads. We're going to use direct mail. How are we making sure that that's a unified message and that they're complementing each other, not competing against each other? And what we see here, for example, is in an awareness campaign, you want to make sure all of these touch points that lead to a sign up is aligned and that it's coordinated. Or again, a prospective supporter here where you're using digital advertising to target them, and then you're following up with email after they sign a petition to give monthly. All of these channels or these touch points are coordinated together and focused on the segment you're focused on, not the channel. It's about the community, not the channel. Same goes with, so this is a great example of a digital advertising campaign where they unified both their keyword search ads, their historical geofencing, and their affinity targeting to reach new donors, but they all complement each other and align. Same goes with when you're cultivating your current donors. You want to make sure that your email, your social, your digital advertising, your direct mail all align so you're providing a consistent message to each of your segments and ultimately being able to drive unified results. And so in this case, you see where the food bank was sending emails, but they were also doing digital advertising that aligned or overlapped with the messaging. So they're using multiple channels to reach the same audience with one message. So one message, one audience, multiple channels. That's really what omni-channel is all about. Number 9 is a bonus, and it's just to keep it simple, start small and focus. We kicked off today's session by saying, hey, what is your focus for end of year? And then we followed that up with introducing a framework that gives you focus and gives you flexibility. And what I would invite you to do is, even though we've shared 8 optimizations for your end of year campaign over the last 40 minutes, I would invite you to just start small. There's something you heard today that you're not doing or that you feel like you could do better. And if that's the only thing you walk away and implement this end of year, that would be success in of itself. You don't have to do all 8. You don't have to do everything I shared today. There was a lot of information, and that was intentional because I'm trying to make sure that there's something in this presentation that you can practically use this end of year to make your end of year campaigns better. And again, it starts by keeping it practical and starting small. A few reminders as we close out is that attention is the most valuable currency. And so as we're thinking about stewarding the attention of our audience, whether it's a new donor or a current donor, we have to focus on relevancy, not reach. Last is that your competition goes beyond other nonprofits. You're not just competing with other nonprofits. You're competing against Netflix, the news feed, everything else that's going on in the world. And so keeping that in context of when we capture attention of our audience, how are we stewarding that well is going to be key. And last but not least, one of the greatest things that I love about marketing is that you get to take chances, make mistakes, and get messy, which was a brilliant quote by the famous Miss Frizzle. And so I invite you to do that this end of year, is to take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. And I think you'll see incredible success this end of year. If you're interested, we put together this end of year toolkit. If you scan the screen now, you can download it. I'd love to give you that resource for free. Now, I want to open it up for questions and invite Danny back up to help us facilitate the closing of the session.
Thanks so much. No, I really appreciate all the information there. I know you said you shared a lot of information and I'm still taking it all in. But thank you so much again for all the time and effort you put into putting this together. We did have a question from the director at Myersdale. If email is the most important channel, what do you do when you live in a mountainous area where many people don't have internet access? They use our internet at the library when it's essential and thus no email. And many others complain that when they get too much email and don't want any more.
I think we might have lost his internet connection right at the timing that it made most sense. Noah, are you with us?
I'm back, I think. Can you hear me okay now?
Here we go.
Yes.
Good. Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Yes, I can put the QR code back up, Laura. So one thing I would mention here is, I didn't get to say, is that benchmarks and best practices are just that. They're benchmarks and best practices. But the best benchmark for you and your organization is your own results. And so the Myersdale director, you might say, like, email isn't the most important channel for our audience. And again, I would encourage you to focus on the community you're trying to engage. You might actually say that doing pop-up events at libraries is the best way that you can engage your audience. And there's nothing wrong with that. Even though the world says, hey, everyone's adopting more digital, you might realize that your audience actually is better to connect with in person because you're in a very small community. And that's the best channel to use to connect with your community. That's totally fine. And I think sometimes we get too much into like best practices and benchmarks that we then allow them to dictate, not inspire our behaviors. But what you're talking about is you're focused on your community. And that was the biggest theme of this presentation, is start with your community and work backwards towards your goals. Don't start with your goals and work through channels to your community. You get wound up the wrong way and your success will follow.
I know you talked about some research and case studies that you guys had done to gather all of this information. Was there anything that you pulled from any of that research that surprised you?
So I think the thing that just maybe it was a reminder, not surprising, is how many organizations are still focused on fundraising through channels only and in silos, and that they're actually like competing against each other. So for example, I was even at and this is a little bit anecdotal, but it was backed up by our research, is that I was at a conference and I said, hey, you want to email your audience, but you also want to do digital advertising to your audience as well. And they were like, wait, you can do that? That's even possible? And again, that's not a critique. It was just like, we have a long way to go. And that even something as simple as like, hey, the audience I'm emailing, I want to show them digital advertising as well to complement that, can have huge impacts on your results. And it's just that one tactic might have a huge improvement. So I think it's some of those like small efforts can have big impacts on your outcome, was some of the most surprising things that we see in our research and combining channels. But then anecdotally and through experience with the community, that most nonprofits are not taking advantage of. And I think, again, it's because we start with what our goal is and what channels we can use, not who is our community, what channels should we use to engage with them, and then to what outcome.
Absolutely. And the more that digital marketing grows, there are so many tools and so many platforms and so many ways that you can approach it. I think it's very easy to get overwhelmed by all the options at our fingertips, that at that point you take on too much too quickly, and then results may look different than what the reality of it could be.
Absolutely. I think a great example of this is like the donation abandonment digital advertising that I mentioned. And you don't even have to do digital advertising, but it's like someone came to your website, they tried to donate, or they went to donate and then they got distracted because their kid cried or their dog barked or TikTok was really interesting that afternoon. They showed intent. Just by re-engaging that population can have a huge impact on it. And so it's like there's a lot of options, but pick one that you aren't doing or that you're not doing well and really focus on that this season. I think it could have huge impacts for our attendees today.
Absolutely. We did have another question come through. Sandra asked, how would you address communications in social media and emails in a city like San Antonio, where we have a large bilingual English and Spanish audience? Would you do separate email or separate accounts and segment by language, or one account with bilingual communication?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, Sandra, I don't have direct experience doing fundraising or Marcom for nonprofits in a bilingual situation. So I'll just clarify that up front. I think the question I would ask you back is, from the audience you're trying to engage with, do you identify that you have a bilingual supporter base, that this is even actually a problem that you need to address? And what I mean by that is that, like, if you're not engaging a bilingual supporter base in your current base, it may inform that you don't need to do that going forward. Now, alternatively, you could say, hey, we've been primarily raising money in San Antonio, and we've only really raised money from English as a first language, like, supporter base. And there's a huge untapped potential. There's a population we really want to engage, and we feel like they would find a lot of value in connecting with our cause. You might say, because we're trying to engage maybe a non-English language first speaking, and maybe that's Spanish or a bilingual household, that we actually want to run a specific campaign through multiple channels in a Spanish first context, for example. And again, it always goes back to like understanding your current community, understanding who you're trying to reach, and then making a decision. there's going to be no answer that just says, hey, yeah, you should do bilingual or not. That's really going to be framed in the context that you're operating in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go
We
ahead.
are running out of time. Noah, do you have time for one more
Yeah,
question?
absolutely. Yeah, I was trying to read the question, but go ahead.
Yeah, perfect. The question is it okay to have different asks in each email or different themes during one end of year campaign? We're doing education, including widow vocation training and school repairs. So I want to know if we should include all the asks in each email or separate them.
Yeah, so a couple concepts here is you want to, if you're going to make an ask, you should make it very clear what you're asking someone to do. And it should be like a yes, I'm in, or no, I'm not, or no response. If you give too many options, you have like decision fatigue and you're going to lose people just because you presented too many options. And I don't know if the widow is more like helpful or should I help the kid with the school repairs? You're now taxing me as your supporter base to make that decision. And I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're very clear on what the ask is and what the persuasive presentation is to do that. Now that might inform that you do need to send separate emails. And what I would also then ask you of is there portions of your audience that have more affinity or alignment to those various programs, where you could actually ask for widow vocation funding versus school repairs to audiences that have shown that they have an affinity or likelihood to support that. So being clear on your ask is really important. Doing different asks and different themes is fine over the course of a campaign. Doing it all in one email is a recipe for disaster. Now, it might work for you. Again, your results are your best benchmark, but it would be completely against like behavioral psychology norms to have multiple asks. Then I have to decide, is the widow or the kid the person that gets the value?
Absolutely. I know you have a couple other things you wanted to share before we go today,
Yeah.
so I want to see if we can get to that.
Yeah, I think if you're interested in learning more about how Feather can help you run and report on all your marketing efforts at end of year and throughout the year, we'd love to chat with you. Our big proposition is that we want to help you unify all of your marketing and reporting, but then also enable you to connect with your audience no matter where they are, whether they're wandering the web, scrolling social, or they're in their inbox. That's where our platform thrives. And so if you're interested in learning more about Feather, I think, Danny, you had a poll that you're going to present as well, and we'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, let me launch that. We did have that option when all of you registered. You were able to fill out that form and opt in, but if you didn't get the chance there and now you've heard Noah share all these wonderful things and you absolutely want to hear more from Feather, make sure you opt in here and I'll get them your information.
Absolutely. And someone asked for the slides earlier, Danny. You're happy to distribute the slides based on your best practices, and you have access to them, so we
Yes.
should be good.
Those will be shared tomorrow in our follow-up email that you should receive tomorrow afternoon. And there will also be a link to the recording of the webinar. We have QGIve and Noah's information up here again. So if you want to reach out to Noah and you want to, I know somebody asked about receiving the QR code again for I believe the resource that Noah shared a few slides ago. If you want to reach out to him about that, you can do that. Or reach out to us if you want to find out more about QGIve. We'd love to talk to you guys more about how we can help your organizations. I know Feather is eager to help out as many different organizations reach their fundraising goals, and QGIve is as well. So I know we're a little past time. I know you all have plenty of things to get done with all the things going on, and we wish you all the best this end of year giving season and with your Giving Tuesday campaigns. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you. Thanks, QGIve, Danny, and Brendan for having me.
Thank you, Noah.
Thanks again,
Great
Noah.
job.
Okay. Cheers, y'all.
Bye.